I was having an interesting conversation the other day with somebody who mentioned a funny terminology actually. We were talking about alcohol and she made a reference to something called the beer fears. I've never really heard of the beer fears as such. I mean, I've heard other terminologies. It's that feeling of dread you get when you've the next day after you've consumed alcohol, and not because you've necessarily consumed too much or done something you can't remember or done something you can remember, more just in relation to the feeling you get when you consume any kind of poison, not just alcohol. But what it kind of reminded me of was, have you ever woken up in the morning filled with utter dread for what we perceive to be no apparent reason, not from consuming alcohol or anything else? You just wake up with this feeling of a pending doom almost. And it kind of reminded me of the beer fears, as this lady pointed out to me, in respect of consuming poison. And I woke up this morning with that feeling of dread, that feeling of consumption, being consumed by something and not knowing why, not having drank alcohol or anything else for that matter, but still having that feeling, and not a memory, not a remembering of a feeling associated with a time where maybe I have drank alcohol. Nothing to do with that. More to do with that consumption of dread and overwhelm. So when I felt that this morning, I stopped and asked myself, what poison have I consumed? And I'm not talking here about a physical consumption. I'm not talking about a food or some kind of liquid. I'm referring to what kind of poison had I consumed mentally the night before that intoxicated my mind to the point of me waking up with the beer fears. Not necessarily, obviously, from alcohol, as I say, but there are many forms of poison. And I think often when we wake up with these feelings in the morning, we one either go to a go-to emotion where we fall into self-punishment for either one, not understanding why we are a particular way, and two, not being able to pull ourselves out of that particular feeling or emotional state. And you often hear people say, oh, well, none of these things are wrong. And they're right, none of these things are wrong. I suppose what I'm kind of saying is we look for an area where we can blame ourselves for not being enough or for the emotion we have. And while we're responsible for the emotion, it's not a blame situation in respect of if we haven't taken other factors into consideration. Like, I find that often we're not told about the moon and how it can affect our moods. Now, I can't speak for anyone else, but for me, it's profound. It's quite profound, so much so, by my emotional state, I can turn around and tell you whether we're coming into a full moon or a new moon quite easily, as well as how heavy I feel and the density of gravity. At points, obviously it remains the same, but at points it feels heavier. And it feels heavier because of the pull of the moon. And I mean, there's no madness to that when you think about the tide being connected to the moon cycle, the toing and the froing of the tide. Then why would it be anything different in terms of ourselves when we are elements of everything that the earth is made of? I think as well, all too often we look for a solid reason for feelings. So we will jump to, oh, maybe I'm depressed. And we give a permanent fixture to a state that is quite temporary. It's temporary in respect of the cycle of the moon. And I think if we were more aware, more consciously aware. A lot of us have the information, but more consciously aware aware to the point of acting on, and not necessarily allowing ourselves to go to the go-to for the reasons of understanding and seeing that that's what we do, but also in respect of not allowing that go-to have the weight or the power that it previously had, by allowing us to character assassinate or self-sabotage. So next time you wake up in the morning and you feel like you're not enough, or you're consumed with dread, or you're feeling anxious, maybe one question if what you think you're feeling you are actually feeling. I know I've often confused trepidation with anxiety. So I suppose we should question what we are feeling, and one, where is it coming from, and are we misinterpreting it, or are we going to a go-to emotion? Is it, for instance, a habit? Have we woken up for several days in a row and we're creating a habit? Or have we gone to sleep at night thinking about things that would cause us anxiety if we woke up in the morning, and failing to remember that? And therefore handing over the power to something else, to something bigger than it necessarily is. I think for me, like this morning when I woke up feeling that way, I've learned to allow myself the feeling, recognize the feeling, be aware of it, and then sit down for a moment and just be, just watch it, just breathe and watch it. And watching it, it will instantly leave. Or that you will come to some spontaneous understanding of it. But the more we do it, the more we move away from blaming ourselves for things that are possibly out of our control, and maybe just temporarily out of our control. If it's to do with the environment, the planet and things, there may be things you can put in place, but you can't control the motion of life and the motion of the planet. But if it's down to internal states, then you can do something. You can observe instead of acting upon straight away. Sometimes the greatest understandings are like stars. They've come and gone before we've really had a chance to appreciate them, but they have left their mark. So that's where it comes to sitting with it for a while. We may not think we're benefiting in that moment or gaining anything from it in that moment, but in the long term, we will see the effects, because next time we wake up in the morning and we feel that way, we also wake up to the possibility that it is something outside of ourselves, and then our go-to is changed. And yes, you also have to be aware then that you don't continuously make that go-to outside of yourself, because there are other times when it is inside of you and it has to be addressed that way. But all I'm saying is, when you do wake up and feel things that you're struggling to understand why you would wake up in the morning and feel something, when you think that sleep gives you a blank slate, and it really doesn't. If only. You can create a blank slate by the thoughts you have prior to sleeping, which I'll talk about another time, which I manage to use quite a lot, and on the whole, I do really well with. But it is really a practice of compassion. It's that fine balance, isn't it, between doing and procrastination, and that fine balance between absorbing and putting back out. You can't really, we understand things on so many levels that when we think we've understood something, it unfolds again, and then we think we've understood something, it unfolds again, and that's where the fine line between procrastination and action is. It's that, how many layers do we let unfold before we believe we have enough to move? So to the best of your ability, always try to unfetter and understand.